Today, it's who's the jerk at work and how to remedy it. What? I'm kidding. Not really. But it's all about the way you relate to others at work and how we perceive them, right? So you want to learn about the hidden factors affecting you, such as the insidious drama triangle, and which, of course, if you haven't heard of it, it wreaks havoc almost everywhere in our society, but at work it creates so much unnecessary strife. No one is playing on the same team as long as they are on the triangle. It's a major player in creating defeating repetitive relationship dynamics. It exerts a surprising influence on your expectations, your deadlines, your communication, and success. Plus, what you find yourself reacting to. And it drives you to stay stuck in the position you're in. So, today, stay tuned. I'm Tracy Crossley, and I'm an author, podcast host, and the game changer for female leaders from the inside out. So, welcome to my YouTube channel, and this is where female leaders can get valuable insight every week, so please be sure to subscribe so that you do not miss any of these little nuggets, okay? So, our topic today is basically the drama triangle and how it undermines relationships. Learning how you got on it, of course, is, I think, one of the more important factors, and perhaps that the person you think is a jerk at work isn't really, they just play the role. So the drama triangle, also known as Cartman's drama triangle, explains a lot. In fact, you will see the drama triangle not only in your life, in your work, it's also in movies. Think about it. You have the villain, you have the hero, the damsel in distress, right? They're on that triangle. Our songs are like this, TV shows, soap operas, clearly. Your friends' relationships, your relationships with them, and so on. People in your workspace. It is everywhere. It's prevalent, and it is a socially acceptable way to be dysfunctional. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the teaching here. So, the Cartman drama triangle is not a right side up triangle, it's a upside down triangle. And it has 3 positions on it. As I've already pointed out, it's the persecutor, the rescuer, and the victim. In the upper left corner is the persecutor, in the upper right corner is the rescuer, and in the bottom is the victim. And since the triangle, which was basically introduced in 1968, like if you were to go to Dr. Cartman's website, he explains the whole process about how he arrived at this place. But anyways, in 1968, there has been definite variations of this triangle since then, but you always want to come back to the victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor, for sure. Unfortunately, these points on the triangle are not only dysfunctional, but they're emotionally draining and potentially harmful to the people involved in the dynamic. A lot of times, you don't realize that you're unconsciously brought into these dynamics because you're so used to it. Like, you've played certain roles your whole life, and you don't realize that perhaps in one situation you're the rescuer, in another situation you're perceived as the bully, in another situation you're seen as the victim. It just depends. And again, until you're consciously aware, like it is in front of you, you see it, you don't know a lot of the time that these are just roles we're playing, okay? So everyone who finds themselves cruising on the triangle will shift their positions, like I just said, depending on the situation. You won't realize it. And the victim needs a persecutor and someone to rescue them, right? Of course, needing someone and being disrespected by them at the same time causes some victims to become the persecutor. But then feeling bad, they want to rescue the person that they basically just shit on, right? Okay, so you probably are thinking of people already that this involves, especially in your workplace, because a lot of these dynamics are not really talked about in the workplace. at least the ones that I've experienced. And it's just so interesting because a lot of it has to do with like blaming other people, or I didn't do that. Nobody wants to be taking responsibility. But of course, responsibility and blame are two different things. So why is this an issue, and what does it show, right? Well, the triangle represents dynamics we've unconsciously chosen to participate in when in relation to other people. All 3 points on the triangle, unfortunately, illustrate a lack of personal responsibility when in a struggle with other people. Think about who you struggle with at work, like the first person that comes to your mind. What position are you in with them? What position are they in? Do you switch back and forth depending on whatever situation happens to be happening, right? If something's working and you just won, a project. How is that going, right? Are you going to victimize yourself? Are you going to be the rescuer? Are you going to be the persecutor? Usually the person we have this with the most is somebody who reflects back to a relationship we had with someone when we were children. Yes, unfortunately, a lot of the stuff born in childhood. So it also shows how the balance of power shifts between people in conflict and points out how individuals show up to interact. An example would be your sales director bullies his salespeople. You as a CEO walk in and try to rescue them by making some form of an offer of peace, right? So nobody quits, everybody's happy, right? And perhaps most of the salespeople say nothing to you, but there's always one person who's going to complain and whine. Even though you think you're saving the day, they remain victimized, and they do not see you as the rescuer, but as part of the problem. That's a great example of a triangle at work. Yeah. Another example where one of you switches positions on the triangle. You're the CEO, and let's say you have short patience for people who don't own their mistakes. This used to be me, by the way. Being, whether they were late, mistakes, or some other offense. And I just wanted people to take responsibility so we could all move on, but that was very difficult because most people that worked for me didn't really seem to want to do that. So anyway, but let's continue. So perhaps your COO is always trying to smooth things over and just nods his or her head at you when you speak, and it bugs you, but this person is trying to keep you from reacting. You then turn into the victim, asking why they patronize you and how you feel bad and want them to treat you with respect and so on. Meanwhile, you turn into the rescuer when an old client says that they're going to another firm. You try to please them and do whatever it takes to hold on. The account executive who manages them and does whatever it takes to hold on and has told you about this over and over feels victimized because you, in the 6 months they've been asking for your help, you never gave it, and they feel you blew it off. And so now you want to rescue this AE, but in all honesty, you're annoyed at what a baby this person is, and you tell your COO, who goes in to actually smooth things over, and again, you feel like no one trusts you, and it is always that way, and you feel like the victim. See how ugly this unconscious crap is? No matter which of these positions you relate to, if you relate to any, look around your workplace and see where this lives. See what teams it lives on. See what departments it lives on. See if you have a small team, look at your small team. What position are people taking? How did we get here? Well, as I've already mentioned, childhood conditioning. Because everything that I relate to in the work I do is childhood conditioning, and my whole goal is to help people undo the childhood conditioning. So childhood conditioning, includes your home life, TV, movies, news, school, peers, everything, right? Everything you're exposed to. And of course, the internet, if you're that young to have been raised on it. Your idea of what you think is correct when it comes to interactions with others, though it is on autopilot, you really aren't aware of why in different relationships you act in certain ways. It's why is it I feel normal and natural around this person, but around this other person, I'm uptight. I feel like I have to watch my words. I walk on eggshells. I'm very uncomfortable, right? So you observed in others a variety of situations when you were a kid, and you made a choice of how you would communicate and relate to others based on what you felt was at stake. And so most of us don't realize we're always negotiating and looking for a benefit for our interactions. A lot of the time, it is the way that things are said and then the actions people take that don't usually match the words in these dysfunctional positions, saying one thing, doing another, right? What's at stake? Well, my friends, until there's awareness, being on the drama triangle allows each participant to avoid addressing the real issues. It's one of the priorities when companies hire us to work on that we get working in a functional way pretty quickly. Because people start to see, oh my God, I'm creating this. I didn't even see I was doing that. And I realize I have misplaced anger, or I have misplaced expectations, or I feel insecure and I'm looking at other people to make me feel better, blah, 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 blah. Okay? That's what we do. I mean, who really wants this sort of drama in their work environment? Nobody, really. I don't. And the way we communicate and expect actions from others can keep you blindly reaching and reacting in these dysfunctional ways so that your productivity is in the crapper. So we watch this form of entertainment because it's familiar. That's why it's in the movies, right? We know the dynamic well. We can have our buttons pushed. Look at the villain getting away with beating the hero up at this point, right? And we're emotionally drawn in, especially based on our conditioning. Totally based on it. You know, we've been conditioned to think this way since childhood, so we don't see another way. We want a winner and a loser. And think again about how entertainment always has climactic moments. It pushes our emotional buttons. Like I just said, good guy, bad guy. And then we want to cheer for that rescuer. We want to cheer for the hero. That's the rescuer, by the way. And the villain is the persecutor, and the victim is the victim, damsel in distress, right? So there definitely doesn't need to be this us against them mentality when you need everyone on the same team going in the same direction, especially in the workplace. We want productivity, we want proactiveness, we want revenue to reflect how wonderful the environment is. Because to me, if you don't have a great environment to work in, your revenue is precarious. Sooner or later, it's affected by how people either get along or don't, because again, it affects their productivity. It affects their interest in even showing up to work. If they know they have to show up and they're going to do battle with someone, or there's a weird sort of tension between them, people don't really want to show up for that. So how we're going to move forward here is let's talk about becoming not just assertive, but honest in our communication. It sounds simple, but if it was, we would be aware that what we're doing with everything we're saying, we would be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm honest, sure. But saying what we really want to share is very difficult for most of us. And I'm not talking about honest communication where you're talking about somebody else screwing up. This isn't about their mistakes. This isn't about them. When you speak honestly, it's about you, okay? So I'm going to give my second best tip first. Pay attention to what's actually happening, okay? Like, actually happening. Not filtered through your filter, okay? But actually happening. So you start paying attention to the thoughts in your head, the feelings they're connected to, and what comes out of your mouth. I'll give you an example. I always have client examples or examples of me, but today, client examples. So Julie is a long-term client of mine. To be honest, she felt like she was always stepping on a landmine. So in her business, she was always, how do you put this, like softening things, good at softening the blow in her words, okay? But it was not really the case, since she felt like she was never really saying what was actually true to her. Like she never actually could say it. She was speaking for the benefit of the others, of what she thought they wanted to hear. Or if she had to say something that was unpleasant, she said it in such a way that it got lost in all of the things she was saying, because she was so afraid of how people were going to take her words. So again, if this is working, it might be acceptable, but it wasn't. Her division was poorly managed. No one knew what to expect from Julie, since it was never really clear. And literally the feedback she received was they did not know if they were getting fired or promoted on a daily basis. She made herself the victim rather than the courageous and honest CEO. Julie struggled with the pain of her past when she would say something and it was misconstrued, and everyone would say, oh, she's a bitch. And the dreaded word, of course, to a lot of female leaders is that word, right? Or some of us wear it like a badge. Just depends on you. But for Julie, no thank you. She did not want to be known that way because she always heard, successful women aren't liked. So she didn't want to make it a worsened situation. But no matter what, she's always creating it, right? But anyways, so she started with stories like the ones she told herself about herself, and that somehow she had to be a good girl and not hurt anybody's feelings. And she would basically stay stuck in her head, ruminating, on a situation with her subordinates over and over from every angle, and get to a point where she bullshitted herself enough so she was more comfortable, and then would deliver what she thought was a softer truth. It was not soft or a truth, it was a mess. So in working with her, she started getting clear about what happened in her environment, what her mind processed it as, right? Like she started seeing things from a different perspective. And she would see how she could turn it around and change it to suit her comfort. Because she was always trying to find, where's my comfortable place? When she was uncomfortable, this is what she would do. So like I said, a lot of this is conditioning. Pretty much everything is conditioning. So her mother, she went back in time. Her mother would accuse her of being a little bitch or uncaring. And so Julie overcompensated so no one would reject her. But by being inauthentic, she made the situation exactly what she did not want. That's the problem. And so, because this is what we do. We do this unconsciously. In doing the work, Julie started to learn what was true without emotionally going down a rabbit hole of fear that others will misconstrue or not misconstrue. I mean, some people don't, but most people did. So the deal is that building her confidence in her ability to process her perception differently and see her triggers differently and how she had different preferences and understand where these preferences even came from, but to basically feel emotional well-being while being honest with herself and others. And this wasn't overnight. This was hard work. Undoing your conditioning, undoing old patterns takes time. But she was willing because she was so tired of the situation she was in. She came out with the awareness of what she did internally and externally, and it was a game changer because she got the hell off the triangle. Okay, so what's the third best tip? Find your fear. Oh boy. I will probably repeat this ad nauseum through, every video I do, because fear has so many disguises, and it's kind of a destroyer of unlimited, abundant leadership. I'd like to use other terminology, but so many people are limited in how they lead that I'm just looking at it like, no. What is the opposite of being limited, right? Okay, so this find your fear is the third best tip, like I said. So here's another example. Marilee was a wonderful attorney. She had a great practice and had 2 other partners. She felt incompetent when it came to leading the business and often fell into victim mode. One of her partners, felt like she was always rescuing her from having to do so many projects. And that lead partner would get super irritated and not really speak to Marilee. And this is one of the things Marilee would talk about with me is, my business partner gives me the silent treatment. She's not really communicating with me. And Marilee found the displeasure of this partner to be triggering and would not say anything. But instead, she acted out in ways that did not help the business. So things came to a head when the senior partner wanted Marilee gone, or she said she would leave. She didn't care that Marilee was a great attorney. That didn't matter to her. What mattered was, I feel like I'm having to pick up everything for Marilee, and Marilee isn't really getting it. Sometimes we do things for other people and we think I'm teaching them and then they're going to do what I'm doing. But people don't emulate us like that. People emulate us when we're not trying to manipulate them to change. Just a word of advice there, okay? So when she came to work with me, we had to dig super deep, obviously. And she realized she chose people she found intimidating to work with so that she would always feel less than. It's funny how we set these dynamics up, but we do, unconsciously. And then she would feel sorry for herself and then bitch about the other person. Her whole focus was not on growing the business, but really her focus was on this stressful relationship with her partner. Working through her fear helped immensely as she started to conquer it. she noticed that she felt better immediately. She started to feel more confident and open. She did what she had not dared to do. So the firm is doing really well now. None of the partners left. In fact, the senior partner made a choice to stay once Marilee started to open up and include her in what was going on. And the senior partner learned how to communicate too. It's really interesting how when you have someone who changes, what it does to the dynamic with others. Because if you're not feeding it, you're not doing the same things, then other people will probably stop doing it. But you cannot do this in a pretend fashion, okay? You can't fake it. You have to be real with it. People, we pick this up in each other. You know, we have an animal instinct, right? We're picking it up in other people. Okay, so I'm saving the best tip for last. And this is always a big one. This is the best tip. Find your resistance to change. Yeah, most of us have problems with that. So my client Channing, let's talk about her. She's a client of mine. Her work situation, meaning her business was doing well, but she had no real relationships with anyone. Her resistance to change was huge. I would ask her to feel it in her body, and that took a while. You can always find the feeling when you're looking for it. It feels heavy. The feeling of resistance is heavy, okay? Yeah, I always feel it like in a wall on my torso. It just is that kind of heaviness, and I feel like I can't move forward. It can also feel to people like you're choking or sick to your stomach. For Channing, in her case, you know, she realized this, right? She realized, oh my God, I have this resistance. How am I ever going to get past it? Because it can feel impossible to change, and maybe this is just the way I am. And so it drove her crazy. Then in a sense, everyone else had control over her emotional state, because she, you know, in dealing with other people felt so insecure, and she couldn't let that be known. And at the same time, here she is being manipulated by other people who may not realize they're manipulating her. And so she would have preferred to avoid any sort of bonding or emotional conversations. But hey, you know, you have to have those, especially when you have people working for you, right? You have to. You don't want to become their mother. You don't want to become their rescuer. You have to have boundaries. And boundaries are not telling other people how to act. Boundaries are how you treat yourself and how you act, because that is how people learn, modeling. There is a psychological theory about modeling, and that is how a lot of us learn to do things, was through the modeling of our parents. And that, I always want to say, it's Antonio Banderas. I always forget his first name. I think it's Arthur Bandera. And yeah, that's just me. Anyways, you could look it up, but it is a developmental theory in psychology. Okay? So, anyways, so she basically wanted to avoid these kind of conversations, but she realized that being totally closed off in most cases, and then bad-mouthing her employees in other cases, basically created a lot of communication bullshit, right? Because here she is, she just kept going around the triangle. She was the victim, she's the rescuer, she's the bully, persecutor, right? She just kept going around, depending, like she would go and badmouth her employees, right? So she's a victim because she feels they're doing something to her, and yet she's bad-mouthing them, so she's a bully or persecutor. So what the hell, right? What is she doing? Yeah, exactly. And if it's you, ask yourself that. I mean, we do a lot of this unconsciously. This isn't so you beat yourself up. None of what I say is to beat yourself up. It's all about moving through it. So in her work, she had to basically get through her resistance to change in the first place. And working through her resistance, she started to change the office dynamic. Even though some people left, she found that those who stayed, by being honest and going through her resistance, she felt more confident and less interested in undermining her own people. Because that's what we do, right? When we're bad-mouthing employees. Her lack of self-worth was at the base of her inconsistent behavior, and working with that resistance in sessions was super helpful. Find your resistance and do not let it run how you manage or how you lead. So I'd love to hear what you think. Love to hear if any of this is resonating with you. I would love to hear other problems you're having so I can provide you with video content on that. And let me know, have you ever struggled with it? And why is it that female leaders may find themselves in these positions, right? Because we always want to please, and then yet we get angry, and yet we feel victimized. Oh my God, it's just the circle, right? The circle of, I don't want to say the circle of life, the circle of society. And so I'd love to hear from you about your relational dynamics. And if you need to get those in order, please email business@tracycrossley.com and we can work with you, your team, your entire business. And really check out my other videos to get a leg up on power and influence for you as a female leader. And that's about it. So I'm Tracy, and I'll see you next time.